Mr. Alan Ebobise, CEO of Africa 50, Mr. Amadou Hott, Vice President, African Development Bank, Mr. Hubert Tamso, CEO, Vice President, Africa Investor, Mr. Sunil Benimadou, CEO, Stock Exchange of Mauritius, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed very happy to be with you this morning for this conference. I am given to speak on Mauritius as an ideal investment destination and gateway to Africa for investors and infrastructure investors. I would like to start by congratulating Africa Investor for successfully bringing together such an important gathering here today, as yet another of its innumerable laudable initiatives to establish connection between government, investors, investments, and the people of Africa. Such events help in eliminating the physical boundaries between nations, be it within the continent or with other continents, and thereby contribute to drastically improve the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. There is today a growing dynamism that is bringing a radical transformation in certain parts of the world, where investors in the past would never even cast the most disinterested attention. This is a process that is quietly shaping the next era of growth and development. Indeed, businesses today are increasingly reviewing their methods to adapt to the global transition, with a shift from the nationwide to the region-wide, from the nation-state to a region-state. This has been going on for some time now, as Kenichi Omei, the Japanese, has been bringing the topic to public attention in his several publications. The point is that when investors are making their decisions today with regards to prospecting markets, looking for sources of raw materials, finding the best skills and talents, or identifying new opportunities, they should shed all inhibitions that blinker their view to restricted domestic or what is perceived as traditional safe markets. Africa, of course, is not one of the places which would fit this description. For a long time, dubbed as the hopeless continent, Africa has been able to discard this image of a continent ridden with diseases, poverty, and poor infrastructure, to one that is rapidly learning to make the most of its own capacities and resources, and bringing about development through the right channels of linkages and partnerships to fuel its rise. The change is being made possible through better governance, stronger leadership, and even harder work by the people of Africa. Years of healthy output growth, continuously exceeding those of the rest of the world, have allowed African governments to invest in infrastructure and create value-added jobs for Africans. Nonetheless, there are still today some bottlenecks and economic issues that are surfacing, such as an over-dependency on commodities to sustain growth and increasing debts to finance projects. However, they are today very different from the problems that have been plaguing the continent for a long time. The opportunities that exist today on the continent provide comfort that the challenges are not unsurmountable. First, there is the richness in terms of natural resources that is unparalleled, with 50% of the world's gold, most of the world's diamonds and chromium, 90% of cobalt, 40% of the world's potential hydroelectric power, 65% of manganese, millions of acres of untilled farmland, among many others that can be found in the continent. The opportunities to use these resources to develop the right value chains within the continent provides significant advantages to both the investors and the people of Africa. Being closer to both the sources of raw materials as well as a better proximity to a market of more than 1.2 billion consumers certainly provides a way for competitive gains and better profit margins. Second, excuse me. In terms of using this same market, there are other possibilities that are being created with better integration, which features high on the African agenda today. For instance, one major step that has been taken is the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which has been adopted recently. That agreement aims at achieving several objectives, namely, to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business persons and investments, to expand intra-Africa trade, to resolve the challenges of multiple and overlapping memberships, to expedite the regional and continental integration processes, and to enhance competitiveness at the industry and enterprise levels through exploiting opportunities for scale production, continental market access, and better reallocation of resources. Indeed, we have to recognize that intra-African trade today stands at 12%, while in Asia it revolves around 52%. Over-reliance on foreign markets is not sustainable, as we are exposed to the whims and caprices of exogenous factors. Even more so, as Africa remains very much dependent on commodity, despite being in a period of high currency and market risks. Therefore, producing on the continent for Africans can yield even more profits for investors. Third, governments are investing massively in infrastructural projects to modernize their countries and make them even more conducive to attract investments in the future. Indeed, Africa will not be able to achieve its objectives if the appropriate means to succeed are not present. Road networks, modern transport systems, more efficient ports, and greater air connectivity remain essential prerequisites to attract business. If we take the examples of the major infrastructure projects that are being realized, we will see that the intentions are in the right direction. The Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia transport corridor, the Konza Tech City housing universities, research facilities, and IT centers, and the Grand Ethiopian Dam will all require significant amount of investment in the next few years. The African Development Bank has estimated that around $130 to $150 billion will be required annually to finance these projects. Again, in a period of rising debts for the continent, favoring equity investments from private sources make even more economic sense for governments. And this is where interesting opportunities exist. Fourth, with the rise of new concepts and technologies, there are immense possibilities for large fintech companies to benefit from what remains as a still underdeveloped financial and telecommunications markets in Africa. For instance, internet penetration in Africa stands at 26.9% today, compared to 53.6% for the world and around 80% in Europe. Lack of international connectivity is a major bottleneck in the internet infrastructure of Africa. And without improving connectivity, the continent will not be able to reap the full benefits of the Internet of Things or Industry 4.0. In addition, banking and insurance penetration remain low as well. This certainly provides a lot of ideas to fintech solution providers. and we have already witnessed the explosion of initiatives such as M-Pesa. But the digital divide should be further bridged to increase access to digital technologies, to bring even greater choice, convenience, efficiency, and to allow the African population access to opportunities that were previously out of reach. The challenge is to build on our own networks and our own entrepreneurs to make the most of what we have with the help of investors from all around the globe. Countries in Africa have the resources, some have the manpower, some the know-how, and some the connections. If the countries in Africa manage to develop the right synergy and a common approach towards the pursuit of an overarching objective, success will follow. However, there exist certain lingering uncertainties with regards to tapping into those investments. Market volatility, political instability, and unanticipated events like Brexit can have disastrous impact on African economies, especially when the appropriate mechanisms are not properly put in place. We understand that over and above markets, investors look for their peace of mind, security, a sophisticated workforce, and legal regime to manage operations. So that was the background that I have depicted before I come to the case of Mauritius. This is where Mauritius comes into the picture. As a country which has successfully managed the transition from a low-income country with an undiversified and weak economic base to one standing at the threshold of becoming a high-income country. This has been made possible through the efforts to nurture a conducive environment to attract talents and investments, and more importantly, position ourselves as a platform of choice to tap in the opportunities that exist in the region. Indeed, in many ways, the attraction of Mauritius lies in its complementarity to the opportunities that present themselves to investors in the region of Africa. Our market size may be constraining. Despite that, we have all the required ingredients to position ourselves as the natural gateway for investors seeking to structure investments into Africa. Mauritius is considered as only one of 10 countries that are entirely free of conflict, putting us as credible hosts for managing cross-border investments. In addition, the widely acclaimed Mo Ibrahim Index of Good Governance, the Democracy Index of the Economist Intelligence Unit, the World Bank's Doing Business Index, and the Income and the Index of Economic Freedom of the Heritage Foundation, all these position Mauritius as number one in Africa. Our laws are crafted according to international best practices, allowing free movement of capital and exchange rates and the acquisition of property. Our hybrid legal system combines the best of all worlds and provides the right of access to independent courts of law, protecting investors and their investments, and guaranteeing free flow of capital. This is particularly enhanced by our wide range of bilateral investment and double taxation avoidance treaties with a number of countries, including an impressive network of such bilateral agreements with African countries. The Mauritian International Financial Center can provide firms with a variety of instruments and tools to manage their African operations in a safe jurisdiction, while ensuring that the businesses obtain a competitive edge over counterparts through its attractive fiscal regime. Our aim is to become for Africa what London has been to Europe, and what Hong Kong and Singapore has been for Asia. And Africa needs this kind of jurisdiction today to fuel and fulfill its ambitions. In fact, Mauritius can be the fulcrum for investors with a curious glance over the opportunities on the continent. As Mauritius is already the main route for private equity investments into Africa. Indeed, we already have over 11,200 Category 1 global business companies in Mauritius, managing an asset base of over $660 billion. We indeed strongly believe in the potential of Africa, and we are leaving no stone unturned to provide the best platform for investments to the continent. Over and above an already well-developed platform and our strong will, what further strengthens our position is our compliance to global standards. The OECD's Global Forum considers Mauritius as a compliant jurisdiction, and we are the first African country to have signed an intergovernmental agreement with the USA to implement the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, the FATCA. Furthermore, Mauritius is signatory of the Multilateral Convention on Mutual Administration Assistance in Tax Matters since 2015, as well as being a member of the Early Adopters Group committed to the early implementation of the Common Reporting Standard on the automatic exchange of financial account information. Mauritius also remains an active member of the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group, the purpose of which is to combat money laundering in Eastern and Southern Africa by implementing the FATF recommendations. Furthermore, Mauritius joined the ECMAT Group, membership of which enhances the prestige and quality image of the jurisdiction since 2003. In addition, we have developed a variety of financial products and incentives for multinational companies to mitigate their risk exposures, maximize their fiscal efficiency and returns, and ensure that they can repatriate the returns freely and safely. We have also defined a number of products that position Mauritius as an ideal platform for wealth and asset management, as well as for managing global headquarters. Over and above the macroeconomic, social, and political aspects of stability, we have an excellent legal framework which allows for the setting up of trusts, which are important tools in the context of international estate planning, with our law providing facilities such as preservation of family property, tax planning, succession and business planning, amongst others. Our offer is further substantiated by the Foundations Act to cater for clients from civil law jurisdictions who are generally less familiar with the trust concept and more reluctant to transfer their assets to a third-party trustee. While trusts have been around for a long time, foundations, on the other hand, are relatively new in the world of wealth management. There are also openings for captive insurance activities, which have been regulated since 2015. The Limited Liability Partnership Act has also been promulgated recently to provide for the setting up and registration of limited liability partnerships in Mauritius. Recently, to further improve the shine of Mauritius, the International Financial Center, let me take this over. Recently, to further improve the shine of the Mauritius International Financial Center, new products and services were offered to position Mauritius as a prime platform for wealth management. At the same time, we aim at moving towards more substance-based activities. For instance, there are tax holidays for asset management companies, tax holidays for asset management companies, investment banks, treasury management centers, overseas family corporations, ultra-high net worth individuals, and high regional headquarters. Another practice that has brought about our development in the financial sector and in our industrial development is the strong government-private sector partnership. Over and above our proposition to businesses willing to use our international financial center, we are developing special economic zones in Ivory Coast, Madagascar, Ghana, and Senegal. Our expertise, our access to African markets, and our diplomatic relations with African countries can be complemented by your know-how, your networks, and your capital to cement our position as the place to be if you want to conquer Africa. Furthermore, our membership to the SADC and the COMESA gives us an edge with regards to several other countries in terms of preferential access to manufactured goods, with access to a consumer base of more than 600 million people, as well as allowing easy movement of business professionals who have set base in Mauritius. Let me conclude by saying I can go on and on about the merits of Mauritius as a platform to service the region and why you should give it your highest consideration as your next business. But I know time is of the essence. I hope that during your stay in Mauritius, our warm winter and our tropical beaches will do the rest of the talking in a more convincing manner. I would like to end by reiterating that you are always welcome to experience the famous Mauritian hospitality, and we look forward to seeing you soon and more often in Mauritius, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.